My mother raised her wine glass at Thanksgiving and smiled at 14 people before saying, "One daughter is a lawyer, the other is a beggar." The table erupted in laughter. I was the beggar. Not because I was broke, not because I needed her money, because she had spent years training everyone to dismiss me. So I smiled, passed the potatoes, and waited. 20 minutes later, Mom stood to praise Claire again. This time, I put down my fork and asked one question. Claire's face turned completely white. Mom's hands stopped around the glass. And that was when I discovered her cruelest lie had never really been about me. I'm Gia Parker. I was 38 that Thanksgiving, and despite what my mother loved suggesting, I paid my own rent, bought my own groceries, and had never once asked her to cover a bill. I worked as a floral designer. To my mother, Linda, that translated into one thing: temporary. She could look at a 12-foot wedding arch, covered in white roses and eucalyptus, hear a bride cry because it was exactly what she imagined, and still call my work that little flower thing. Claire was different. My older sister was 42, a lawyer, and the kind of daughter my mother could introduce before dessert was even served. She's in law. That sentence opened doors for Mom. My job usually needed an explanation. Growing up, I learned the difference early. When I was 17, I won an art award at school. Nothing huge, just a certificate with my name printed across the top and a blue ribbon stapled to one corner. I carried it home inside a plastic folder so it wouldn't bend. Mom was slicing apples at the kitchen counter when I showed her. She looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. "That's nice, honey." Then Claire came through the door and announced she had been accepted into a summer business program. Mom dropped the knife onto the cutting board and hugged her. My certificate remained on the counter beside the apple peels. I remember staring at it while Claire talked. That was probably the first time I learned to make my own excitement smaller before someone else could do it for me. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the exception. She used to sit beside me while I sketched flowers at her kitchen table and tell me that creating something beautiful was not a waste of a life. The pearl earrings I wore at Thanksgiving had belonged to her. After she died, I saved them for days when I needed to feel like at least one person from my family had once understood me. My father, Robert, understood enough to soften things sometimes. He died a few years before this happened. After that, Mom stopped having anyone around who challenged her comparisons. Claire had the career, I had the hobby. Claire had ambition. I was finding myself. My apartment was cute. My work was creative. Every compliment came with a ceiling. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Mom called to confirm I was coming. Before hanging up, she added, "Wear something nice. Claire's coming straight from the city." I looked at the pearls on my dresser. Even then, before anyone raised a glass, I knew exactly which daughter my mother wanted the room to notice. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was wiring white roses into a centerpiece at the studio when a woman named Rebecca Cole came in to pick up flowers for a corporate dinner. She was in her late 40s, sharp suit, calm voice, the kind of person who noticed everything without staring. We started talking while I wrapped the arrangement. When she asked if I had siblings, I mentioned Claire. "My sister's a lawyer." Rebecca paused. "Claire Parker?" I nodded. Something shifted in her expression. I thought she left her firm earlier this year. My hand stopped over the ribbon. "No, she's still there." At least that was what Mom had been telling everyone. Rebecca immediately backed off. "I may be remembering wrong. Anything I know professionally isn't mine to share." Then she added quieter, "But some things are public." That sentence followed me home. I hated myself a little for searching. It felt petty at first, like I was looking for proof that Claire wasn't perfect, but what I found didn't feel satisfying. It felt wrong. Claire had left her firm almost 6 months earlier. Around the same time, the firm had gone through an internal review involving billing practices, questioned bills and adjustments totaling around $200,000. Nothing I found proved Claire had committed a crime. Nothing said she had been charged with anything, but her departure had happened during the review, and Mom had never mentioned a word. Just the week before, she had told Aunt Carol that Claire was busier than ever. I closed my laptop. Maybe Claire was embarrassed. Maybe she needed time. I understood that more than anyone. What I couldn't understand was the lie. A few days later, my cousin Jenna texted me. "Can we meet just us?" We sat in a neighborhood cafe where the espresso machine hissed every few minutes, and nobody around us cared about our family. Jenna barely touched her coffee. Then she unlocked her phone. "There's something I should have shown you a long time ago." It was a family group chat. A group chat I wasn't in. There were jokes about my apartment, pictures of floral arrangements with comments about my creative phase. Claire had participated. Mom had reacted with laughing emojis. That hurt, but then Jenna scrolled farther. I saw a message from Claire, thanking Mom for helping with rent. Then another from Mom asking everyone not to mention Claire's work situation at Thanksgiving. I looked up. How long has Mom been helping her? Jenna swallowed. Since May. I stared at the screen. Mom had spent months calling me unstable while secretly paying Claire's rent, and suddenly, before she ever used the word beggar, I knew exactly where that joke had come from. That night I sat on the edge of my bed, with Jenna's screenshots open on my phone, and felt something inside me become strangely quiet. Not victorious, not relieved, quiet. Claire needing help didn't make me happy. If anything, it made everything uglier. She had spent years being the daughter who never stumbled. The one Mom displayed like proof that our family had done everything right. I could almost understand why Claire had hidden what happened. What I couldn't understand was Mom. Since May, she had been helping Claire with rent and other bills. Since May, she had known Claire was no longer living the polished life she kept describing to everyone. And during those same months, she had asked me when I was going to find something more stable. I walked into my kitchen and looked around. Small table, second-hand chairs, a stack of unopened mail beside a vase of dried lavender. Nothing impressive, but every lamp, every plate, every square foot was paid for by me. For the first time, I realized I wasn't embarrassed by my apartment. I was embarrassed that I had allowed my mother to teach me to be embarrassed by it. I printed only the screenshots Jenna had given me permission to keep. Then I made a simple timeline. May, Claire leaves the firm. May through November. Mom helps cover Claire's rent and bills. Summer. Mom keeps telling relatives Claire is thriving. November. Mom tells me I should think about becoming more responsible. I stared at those 4 lines for a long time. I could have called people. I could have posted things. I could have tried to humiliate Claire the way Mom had humiliated me. But that would have meant accepting Mom's rules. One daughter had to be above the other. I was finished playing that game. My plan became simple. I would not expose Claire. I would not start a fight. But if Mom used me as a punchline again, I would stop protecting the lie that made the joke possible. Thanksgiving morning, Mom called before 8. "Can you bring something for the table?" "What kind of something? Flowers? You know, make it look nice." I almost laughed. The career she treated like a hobby was suddenly useful when guests were coming. Still, I made the centerpiece. White roses, eucalyptus, dark red berries. By noon, my studio smelled like wet stems and cold greenery. Before leaving, I slipped Grandma Eleanor's pearls into my ears. Then I placed the printed pages inside my bag. I wasn't going to Thanksgiving looking for a war. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into that house unprotected. By 5:30, people were packed around Mom's dining room table. The house smelled like turkey butter, cinnamon, and the pine candles she lit every Thanksgiving. Whether anybody liked it or not, my centerpiece sat in the middle of the table. White roses, eucalyptus, dark red berries. Aunt Carol leaned over it and smiled. "This is beautiful, Gia." Before I could answer, Mom said, "She's always been good with little creative things." Little. There it was again. I took my seat and folded my napkin across my lap. Claire sat 3 chairs away in a cream sweater, looking polished enough to walk into a courtroom. If you didn't know better, you would never guess she hadn't worked at her firm in months. Dinner started normally. Football hummed from the living room. Forks scraped plates. Someone complained about airport traffic. Then Mom tapped her spoon against her wine glass. Everyone looked up. She smiled. I have so much to be thankful for, especially my daughters. My stomach tightened. She turned toward Claire. One daughter is a lawyer. Claire gave a small, uncomfortable smile. Then Mom looked directly at me. The other is a beggar. For half a second, nobody moved. Then laughter broke around the table. Not everyone, but enough. One uncle laughed into his napkin. Someone near the end whispered Linda. Mom laughed hardest. Oh, come on. Gia knows I'm kidding. I could feel heat crawling up my neck. My fingers tightened around my fork. Every part of me wanted to say something. Instead, I smiled. Sure, Mom. The laughter faded. Dinner moved on. But I didn't. I chewed turkey I couldn't taste and listened to people talk around me like nothing had happened. 20 minutes later, dessert came out. Pumpkin pie, coffee, whipped cream from a can, because Mom insisted homemade was too much trouble. Uncle David asked Claire how work was going. Claire opened her mouth. Mom cut in. Let's not talk shop tonight. She works too hard as it is. Claire stared at her plate. That was the moment something inside me settled. Not exploded. Settled. Mom stood again and lifted her glass. One more toast, she said, to our brilliant lawyer. I put my fork down. The sound was small, but Claire heard it. So did Mom. I looked at her. If I'm the beggar, Mom, why have you been paying Claire's rent since May? Silence. Real silence. I could hear the coffee machine clicking in the kitchen. Claire's face drained white. Mom's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Aunt Carol looked from me to Mom. Nobody smiled. Mom recovered first. This is not the time. You made it the time when you called me a beggar. Claire whispered. Gia, don't. I turned toward her. I'm not ashamed that you needed help. Her eyes lifted. I mean that. Then I looked back at Mom. What I'm ashamed of is that you knew Claire was struggling, helped her quietly, and still spent months using her life to make mine look worthless. Mom's mouth tightened. You're jealous. No. I reached into my bag and placed 3 printed pages beside my plate. Nothing private beyond what Jenna had shared with permission. Just enough. You knew Claire left her firm. You knew you were covering her rent and bills, and you still told everyone she was thriving while calling me unstable. Mom's voice grew sharper. How dare you embarrass your sister like this? Aunt Carol spoke before I could. Linda, stop. Mom turned toward her. Carol didn't look away. She didn't create this. That hit harder than anything I could have said. I stood. My knees were trembling, but my voice wasn't. You don't have to admire my life. You don't have to understand my work, but you will never use me as a joke again. Mom called my name as I reached for my coat. I kept walking. The pearl earrings felt cold against my skin when I stepped onto the porch, and for the first time, leaving that house didn't feel like losing my family. It felt like walking away from the role they had written for me. My phone started buzzing before I reached my apartment. First came the family group text, then individual messages, then silence from the people I expected to hear from most. One cousin wrote, "You could have handled that privately." Another said, "Your mom was joking." I stared at that message for a long time. That word again. Joking. As if adding laughter to cruelty somehow erased the cruelty. I turned my phone face down and made tea. The apartment was exactly as I had left it that morning. The dried lavender, the second-hand chairs, a pair of pruning shears beside the sink. Nothing had changed, and somehow everything had. The next morning, Aunt Carol called. Her voice sounded quieter than usual. I should have said something years ago. I didn't answer right away. She continued. We all knew Linda compared you to. We told ourselves it was harmless, because you always laughed. I laughed because nobody else stopped her. Carol went quiet. Then she said, I know. That mattered more than an apology would have, not because it fixed anything, because someone had finally named what happened without asking me to soften it. Claire didn't contact me for 4 days. When she finally did, it was one sentence. "You could have protected me." I read it twice. Then I typed back. "I spent years protecting everyone but myself. I didn't add anything else. I didn't tell her she deserved what happened. I didn't bring up the firm. I didn't share her work situation online. Whatever consequences Claire faced professionally belonged to Claire, not me." That was the line I refused to cross. Mom was different. Her first message was nearly a page long. She said, "I humiliated her, ruined Thanksgiving, put Claire in an impossible position." Then came the sentence I had heard my entire life. "I was only trying to help you." I finally understood something. Mom believed comparison was motivation. She thought shame would push me toward a life she could brag about. And because I had tolerated it for so long, she had mistaken my silence for permission. I responded once, "If you want a relationship with me, there are 3 things that stop now. No comparing me to Claire, no jokes about my work or money, and no discussing my life with relatives as if I'm a problem you're managing." Mom didn't reply that day, or the next. That hurt. But it didn't break me. A few weeks later, I wrote an essay. I didn't use names. I didn't mention Claire's firm. I wrote about growing up in a house where one child became the measuring stick and the other became the warning. A small local arts group shared it. Then they invited me to read at an evening event. There were maybe 40 people in the room. Nothing glamorous. Folding chairs, a cheap microphone, coffee and paper cups. Before I went on stage, I touched Grandma Eleanor's pearl earrings. My hands were shaking. Then I started reading and the room became silent. Not the silence from Thanksgiving. That silence had been shock. This one was attention. Nobody laughed. Nobody compared me to anyone. They just listened. Afterward, I went home alone. I unlocked my small apartment, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the kitchen under the warm yellow light. For years, I had thought peace would come when my mother finally admitted I was enough. I had been wrong. Peace came when I stopped needing her to decide. I didn't win because Claire fell. I won because I stopped letting my mother turn my life into evidence that someone else was better. Sometimes family love gets tangled up with control, comparison, and shame. Setting a boundary doesn't make you cruel. Sometimes it's the first honest thing you've done for yourself. I still wear Grandma Eleanor's pearls. Now they remind me of something simple. My life never needed permission to matter. Have you ever had to stop someone you loved from deciding your worth?